Riel, can you tell if we're live? Yes, we are live. I can see it. So, this is great. Welcome, everyone. Please share this broadcast with your friends and colleagues. My name is Rick Ulfik, and I am founder of We the World and the We campaign at we.net. There you can learn more about We the World. We're in day 4 of the 16th anniversary of 11 Days of Global Unity, which go from September 11th through September 21st, the International Day of Peace. Back in 2004, We the World brought global partners together to launch 11 Days. And this year, 11 Days is concurrent with the Up Convergence and Peace Weekend with an extraordinary alliance of organizations, including Unity Earth, the Compassion Games, the Sign Network, We the World, over 100 groups that I think are part of an unprecedented unity movement, which of course is more important now than ever. To learn more and participate in 11 Days of Global Unity, please go to 11daysofglobalunity.org. And the 11 is a numeral, 11daysofglobalunity.org. Each year, We the World hosts the 11 Days of Global Unity TeleSummit with 11 powerful dialogues on each of the 11 campaigns for change. They're happening each day during September, from September 11th through the 21st, each day starting at 1 p.m. USA Eastern Time. And today, day 4 of 11 Days of Global Unity is on the theme of economic justice. And today we have an amazing group of people to talk about economic justice with a focus on the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. Today we have Mary Aguilera, Brian Mallory, Samuel Prince, and Jana Larsen. Let's start with Mary Aguilera. Mary Aguilera was led to the work she is doing now through mobilizing for the Ohio People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. With the Buckeye Environmental Network, she is working to stop the Appalachian petrochemical hub from invading the Ohio River Valley while she is doing more. And that's an acronym. It stands for mobilizing, organizing, registering, and educating people for the Ohio People's Campaign, building capacity every day for a global beloved community. Welcome to the broadcast, Mary Aguilera.
Oh, thank you, Rick. It's so wonderful to be here. And a shout out to Jana, who is with us, who started this whole thing, created this connection. And I'm just so honored to be here with you, Rick and Jana, who started, and are part of this global movement. And I see it as really kind of the global version of the Poor People's Campaign, the National Call for More Revival. It's we're all doing the same work, and it's about connecting and bringing us all together and breaking down the barriers that keep us separated. And doing this work, that's what I really, really feel is our true calling, is to connect. And thank you for being that global facilitator of this work for everyone to connect.
Sure, thank you.
So Ohio Poor People's Campaign National Call for More Revival is part of a movement that was revived, the 1968 Poor People's Campaign from Martin Luther King and many others. And it's about really telling the real story of our country, of the United States, and putting the narrators of the real the real narrative out, because we, as a society, I think we don't really understand how bad it really is. And I think that's intentional. The powers that be don't want people to understand how bad it is. There's 140 million people at or below the poverty line before COVID. And now since COVID, that those lines, I just watched a segment on the news last night, and about how there was 10,000 people in line to get food in California, and that was, now it's even worse. So this economic justice, we can't move forward until we really, take a long, hard look at what the real narratives are in our country and face them, and come together as we're doing to face the real problems that are the root causes of all the issues we're dealing with now. So
Yeah. It's interesting. You talk about 140 million people being at or below the poverty level. Now, most people, I think that would be a shocking statistic for most people, because they have heard, people are in poverty. There's like 38 million people or so who are at the poverty or below. But the 140 million number, can you talk about that more? It's like a little bit around the poverty level. So it's still, they're earning like not a living wage, even though it's above the poverty level, right? So, do you want to say more about that?
yeah, and also most economists agree that the version that the government is using of measuring poverty right now is way out of date. So the way where we get our numbers is from the Institute for Policy Study, and they use what's called the supplemental poverty measure. And so that's where we get the true numbers, where you account for all these other factors, and then you get that true number. So, it's people that are, $400 away from a crisis. And now with COVID, all those people that were just barely making it, with these wages that are unlivable, now have completely, their lives have been completely, destroyed. So many people that were never, needing assistance, now they're, all those people that were barely making it are now, needing assistance. And then even people that were making it now, are forced into this number. So I wouldn't even begin to guess what those true numbers are now.
Right, exactly. And as we know, the whole COVID crisis has exacerbated the problems for the people who are the most vulnerable, the people who are the lowest income.
Exactly. And here in Ohio, 48% of the children in Ohio are at or below the poverty line, 40% of women. And I think, every time I think about that, no matter how many times I say it, I just, it's just heart wrenching. And that was, again, pre-COVID. So now we know it's, well over 50%, I'm sure now.
Right. So we're looking at the image behind you has some very interesting things in it. You want to talk about that a little bit? It's like
sure.
the whole everything that you're working on in your life, right?
Yeah, so the Poor People's Campaign National Call for More Revival is about the intersection between poverty and racism and militarism and ecological devastation, and what we call the corrupt moral narrative of religious nationalism. And so, kind of taking after, I think it was Loretta Scott King who said, you know, poverty is violence. Well, so is global warming. So is, you know, polluted water and all these things. So that, you know, these signs came from the revival 2 years ago. And I think there's a reason, you know, there's a reason why you and there's a reason why Jana reached out. There's a reason why we're all connected right now, because, you know, I believe we had 2 years to prepare for this and to build power and to build these amazing relationships. It's not a coincidence, you know, that we had two years to speak to these issues, because you know, it was meant to be that we were able to bring people together at this moment in time, and have this presidential election that is, you know, the most significant election in a very long time. There's a reason that we built this power, and one of the candidates is going to show up tonight with our moral mass meeting assembly, and one is not. And I'm sure you can guess who that is. But that power that we built, I think this moment tonight is a clear indicator of why we are doing what we are doing right now. Because if we can get that person in the room and speak to that person, you know, it can give people hope. It can give people a reason to keep pushing at the most critical moment of our lifetimes.
So I think you're talking about an event being organized by the Poor People's Campaign called Voting is Power Unleashed. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes.
And you're saying both presidential candidates were invited to that, but only one has confirmed that at this point? That's
correct, because we're nonpartisan, and we believe about pushing the issues, and not you know, the candidates should be taking our agenda, not telling us what their agenda is. So we believe in pushing, we have demands, and we believe in pushing those issues and making them say yes to our demands, even though they may want to say no. So that's, you know, tonight with, you know, they were both, whenever we do anything, invite any kind of candidates, we always invite both parties, because that's what you have to do, or else there's no integrity. You know, we can't say we're nonpartisan. So yeah, so that the event this evening is about uplifting the power of those low-income voters and non-voters. The power's in our hands, literally just in our hands, if we decide to use it. And, you know, historically, there's a report that came out and showed if 30% of those voters that normally don't vote just come out and vote, we can, like, there's no doubt about it. We can swing this election the way we need to go, that will empower the people that are most likely to push and pass our demands. And that's what it's all about.
Right. And I think one of the points that I've heard mentioned quite a bit is how during debates like the primary debates and other kinds of debates, the word poverty is hardly even mentioned, right? Many candidates focus their attention on the middle class, even though these numbers are staggering, as you're talking about. And of course, you know, the climate crisis is also something that is hardly mentioned, and environmental degradation, as we all know, also affects people of low income more than others. Do you want to say anything more about that?
Yeah. So, you know, I was watching an event that we did from the launch of the campaign, and Reverend Barber was speaking about hearing the language of the Poor People's Campaign in the news. It's talking about fusion politics and about intersection of the, the issues. And he says you're cutting through. We're cutting through the language, right? That it's about changing the narratives, and to change the narratives around these issues, you have to change the narrators. And that's what this campaign is about, is putting the people that are most impacted by the issues in front and center and sharing their voices, because no one can argue with someone's experience. So that started 2 years ago. And to look how the landscape has changed, we had two presidential candidates mention the Poor People's Campaign in a debate. And whether you agree with those candidates or not, at least they talked about it, right? They're cutting through. We're talking about poverty. We had a congressional Congress where 9 presidential candidates got up and they got interrogated by Reverend Barbara and Reverend Liz and poor people. Like, when has that ever happened, right? So that, that was a year ago. Now we have one of the presidential candidates showing up tonight, right before an election. I mean, this is historical. And it's you, it's Jana, it's Brian, it's Samuel, it's me, it's everybody in the Poor People's Campaign doing this work, bringing it together, making this happen. And it's about the people that are most impacted, especially like around ecological devastation right now, more than ever. Oh my gosh, basically the world is on fire, right? As we're seeing, and how much more has to happen before, people are making the connection. It's like Mother Earth is like trying to slap us across the face and say, look, this is what's happening and you better deal with it. It's just, that's what it's about. It's the people that are most impacted are usually the people most often impacted by the ecological devastation, whether it's the industry taking advantage of them because they don't have a voice in the ability to fight back, or it's just natural, because that's where they put the plants. And like with COVID, those people are, the people that are subjected to the industries and the pollution and all that, they are already susceptible. So then you add COVID on top of that, and then it's just a recipe for disaster.
Exactly. Well, thank you, Mary. Let's bring in our next guest. Brian Mallory is a member of the Poor People's Campaign Coordinating Committee and part of the Cleveland End Poverty Now coalition. Upon becoming homeless himself as a young adult, Brian began a personal journey, first as a volunteer in shelters, then as a worker in social service agencies serving the unhoused, and now working as a community organizer for Organize Ohio. Brian is working with the Poor People's Campaign at poorpeoplescampaign.org, and you can also go to organizeohio.org. Welcome to the broadcast, Brian Mallory.
Thank you, Rick. Can you all hear me? Pretty good?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, can you hear me? Are we good?
Yeah.
All right.
We're good.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And just to piggyback a little bit on what Mary was saying, throughout history, it has always been the role of moral movements to turn pain and righteous anger into a transforming force. And we're talking about in the history of the US from abolition to Reconstruction, the organized outrage of the labor movement, women's movement, civil rights movement, and more. And the thing that all of these movements in US history have in common, and indeed, if you look at moral movements around the world, is that they compel governments to make transformative action. And they are made up of a broad base of the community where this is going on. And we are no different. We are intersectional, I think is the word Mary used. We represent all faiths, credos, and those who have no belief. We represent all generations. We represent all the ways that humanity presents itself in the physical package. And you know, this is important work. And we're standing on the shoulders of giants like Dr. King and Gandhi and others who patterned a way of nonviolent social change. So that's what it's about for us. And in this moment, at this time, we need this more than ever. Mary mentioned some of the statistics of the United States pre-COVID. And we aren't going to see that misery spread, and the numbers are going up as we speak. So we see this as an opportunity for hope. That's why we are organizing around our Justice Jubilee platform, which speaks about those higher aspirations, those moral and ethic aspirations that the United States says it was founded upon. And we call on our citizens and our moral leaders and our political leaders and our government to enact a better society through these steps. So with that, I don't know what else to say.
Well, I would be interested to hear you you talk about more about the Justice Jubilee platform. Is that a project of the Poor People's Campaign?
Yes.
And how do people get involved with it? Is it a local thing or a national, international, or what is it?
All the 46 states that have Poor People's Campaign National Call for Moral Revival coordinating committees. That also includes my hometown of the District of Columbia. Shout out to DC. Yes, this is our organizing principle. We generally speaking, I think the last time we were with you, Rick, we talked about the 12 principles of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. But this hones in more specifically on the issues that we need to be working on in regards to where we find ourselves currently politically. And I just want to take a moment, you know, Jubilee is a very powerful word. And I thought I knew what it was as a preacher's kid, but I had to go look it up. And Webster's definition I have here with me, it says, a special plenary indulgence granted during a year of Jubilee to Roman Catholics who perform certain specified works of repentance and piety. And that's a very specific thing that the definition number 5 under Webster's is a religious song of African Americans, usually referring to a time of future happiness. And I guess we at the campaign kind of a fusion of those two concepts. This is something that is very a time where we need to have, you know, referring to our history, to be hopeful of a time of future happiness. But we also have to be very mindful that, you know, there is a spiritual and moral component to this, and it is time for repentance. It is time for the nation to repent. It is time for people to get serious, you know, to address these 5 interlocking evils. Let's call them what they are, that Mary was referring to: systemic racism, systemic poverty, militarism and the war economy, environmental degradation, and the false moral narrative of Christian nationalism. These 5 interlocking evils have been the bedrock that has held this country back, and people like myself. And when we address this, then we have the key to our salvation. You know, we in the movement say, when you lift from the bottom, you know, everybody rises. We also say everybody has a right to live. If we are truly dedicated to being a government of and by the people, then we are going to have to address this.
Right. And you know, one thing I think of with the word Jubilee is that idea of canceling debts after a certain period of time, right?
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. And it's right there in our document. Yes, all debts that cannot be repaid must be relieved. And there is a strong, not just spiritual component to that, but just realistically. I mean, my grandpa said you can't get blood for a turnip, so why try, But yes, um, these are very concrete, practical steps. And if you like, I can get into as much detail as you'd like. The Jubilee platform is broken into 5 sections. And let me just, if I may, pull out the sections here. It's kind of organized around like our Constitution is. But we'll start with part 1. Ending systemic racism, establish justice. That's the right to democracy, equal protection under the law. This should not be negotiable, okay? Well, and what does that mean specifically? We're talking about protecting and expanding the right to vote, protecting the honor and rights of First Nation, Indigenous, and Native people, ending the violence of police brutality and mass incarceration, and redirecting those resources towards those most impacted communities, and establishing a Truth and Justice Commission on police brutality and mass incarceration. Protecting immigrant communities, recognizing that their place and their role is important in society, and demilitarizing immigration and border enforcement. Building a wall, please.
right.
Protecting democratic elected leadership from being undermined by unelected financial emergency managers. This is how the city of Flint ended up having the situation that they had. The government was, the people were disenfranchised by a government who appointed managers that the people had no control over, and that was done to resolve a budget shortfall. Putting money ahead of people ultimately. We're talking about securing the quality and equitable of diverse public education, ending the segregation of schools, and protecting public education. And lastly, relieving student debt, providing free higher education for all who want it. I mean, that should just be a basic thing. I mean, we are the richest, wealthiest country that has ever existed in the history of man. This should not be a hard thing to achieve.
Right. So it sounds very comprehensive, and so that's really wonderful. And I thought also, if you want to make the connection and talk a bit about your reaction to the protests that have kind of inflamed communities around this country and around the world since the killing of George Floyd. Do you want to talk about that? Because it sounds like a lot of these things that you're saying is part of the Justice Jubilee platform that it sort of coincides with a lot of what was being called for in these protests.
Yes, and I live in Cleveland, Ohio, and just my personal history, this is the second time in my lifetime that we've seen mass unrest in Cleveland. I resided in this town back in the late 60s as a little boy, and remember the summers of 68 and 69 and 67 when there was people in protest in the streets. There was, mass police actions against the population. And I've lived long enough to see it again. Also here in my local community, we have one of the worst county jails in the United States, where over the last several years, we've had over a dozen people, I believe, close to a dozen people who have died under custody of the state, just here in our local county jail. That has incensed folks because of the inability of our local and our state government to rectify that situation. And in too many of these cases, overwhelmingly, it is low-income people, but specifically people of color, Black people, my Latinx brothers and sisters, people who are transgendered or non-gender binary, who are suffering most egregiously in my community because of these injustices. And it seems to be the reaction, the knee-jerk reaction is to spend more money on police and build more jails. My city government spends 58 cents out of every dollar that they have on supporting our local police department. We have, I believe it's almost 60 different police forces in my county, from private police forces to the public transit system has a police force, even vaulted public and private institutions like Cleveland Clinic have their own private police forces, and all these jurisdictions overlap. And people wonder if whether or not this money could be better spent to support the communities where this over-policing is going on. We want more butter and less guns, basically. Everybody can understand that. And Cleveland is no different. We have another converging thing in it where where environmental degradation plays into. We have a horrible lead situation, and our local government has agreed to finally, after decades of knowing about this public health crisis of lead, the children of Cleveland are basically our lead testers. When we're talking about children under the age of 6. And our community has worked hard to galvanize our leaders to come up with a fair and equitable way to protect low-income children from being lead poisoned. And again, your question was on mass incarceration and unrest in the streets, but these are things that are my neighbors and the colleagues of community organizers that I work with are jazzed about. And of course, everyone is aware of the tragic police murders of Cleveland citizens like Tamir Rice and Desmond Franklin, that just happened since this pandemic started, since April of this year was one of our latest ones. So we have a lot of work to do.
That's right.
Mhm.
So, okay, well, thank you, Brian. Let's bring in our next guest. Let's see. Okay. Samuel Prince served as an Anglican priest for 19 years while being employed as an IT director. His clerical and secular career have always allowed him to see the importance and intersection of justice, whether biblical or social. He serves as a tri-chair for the Poor People's Campaign in Ohio. Welcome to the broadcast, Samuel Prince.
I thank you for having me here, Rick. Thank you for having me here. And my colleagues have said a whole lot there, and I don't even know where I should start now, But let me just start from the from the aspect of the fact that the Poor People's Campaign have been commenced, and it really have raised its voice on spirituality. And there is nothing more in which I could think of. There's a favorite scripture of mine that says that what is good, what is God is asking back from you, that for us to do justice, to walk humbly with your God, and to be loving kindness. When you look at those words, Rick, I think it all intersects with justice. Walking good, being humble, and doing things which is just. And if I could just piggyback on something in which Brian had just said, is the fact that the question in which you asked him about the fact that when you see all these unrests occurring and so forth, how does it make him feel? And for me, I always go back and I look at the words in which MLK said. MLK says that riots is the language of the unrest. Riots is the language of the unrest. So if there is people who is being suppressed, who is being suppressed because of a lack of justice. And when I say justice, I'm speaking about the whole intersectionality of what justice is. You know, the fact that the Poor People Campaign, when I first became a Poor People Campaign organizer, I wasn't quite sure, Rick. I wasn't quite sure that if this was for me, because I wasn't hearing the voices of the poor. And then when I began to realize that the narrative need to be changed, the voices of the people now needed to be uplifted, and I was speaking to people whose life has been touched in many ways because of economics, because of LGBT, because of criminality, because of food, because of so many different forms of justice in which people have had. It really had put me back, and I had to take stock in myself. I had to go back, and as I began looking at myself, and I'm comparing with the values, the standards, the demands in which the poor people was asking for, I said, I gotta get involved with this. And so, you know, speaking to my two colleagues, I was grabbed and I was put into, I just loved it. It just enveloped my whole entire spirit. And you know, but it matches my values. It goes with my standards of way of living. You know, the Poor People Campaign, it really, when we speak of poor people and economic justice, I mean, that really helps me to see the fact that what is it sometimes that we mean by economic justice? For me, it means a fight for 15, not a fight for 12, but a fight for 15, because various studies have shown us if a person could have a per hour wages of $15 an hour, they could meet some of what their needs are, or most of what their needs are. So the question which I always ask myself, why are corporations, why are uh, companies or so forth, why are they so resistant towards a 15? And yeah, I could see why. You know, sometimes it's not going into those who work for you, but it's going into someone else's pocket. And that to me is where this whole matter of injustice comes comes in. So as as we think of Jubilee, yeah, it's about repaying that debt. It's about repaying things back to people as to who should be making enough so that they could survive. And of course, when we think of coronavirus now, when you put all that on top of this, and we look at a person's health care, we look at a person's economic means, and you look at the fact that persons need to, 1 out of 10 people, Rick, as of today, 1 out of 10 people don't have enough food on their table. And we live in a country which is modernized. And again, as the figure in which Mary quoted, about 140 million people. You know, when you look at that number, that's about 42% of the population in our country who are either poor and or low income. And that low income is where that 15 dollars come from. So for me, the fact that economic justice, it really transcends itself into the way as to how justice economically is being distributed, because a worker is the person who distributes what a company needs. If that distribution is not there, or that equality is not there for that person, it creates an equilibrium which is perfectly unbalanced, because they're not receiving the means in which they can, so that number one, that they could pay their rent, they could pay their phone bill, they could take care of their kids. These means are not being met. And then it goes into the pockets of someone else. You know, I work from home, Rick. I work from home. You know, over the past 4 months, I've worked from home 4 or 5 months now, and it burns my heart. It burns my heart, the fact that others don't have the same privilege like what I do. And when I began to look at that, I began to understand the inequality in which most people have. But also, on the top of that, Rick, when I began to hear about healthcare, and the fact that my healthcare is tied to my job, what happens if I lose my job? I lose my healthcare. And then what happens? It makes me poor as quickly as I could say that. You know, so all these factors in which we're seeing, I mean, all the things and what Brian had said and Mary had said, this is why the poor people are here. And this is the reason why we are energizing people. We're looking to motivate people so that they could be a part of what this whole entire movement is. And I feel that the more we bring these points towards people, and the more we open up their eyes, the more we open up the ways of how this system is. And if it could help me, I am absolutely sure it could help others. And that is most of the personal stories there in which I do have. But, you know, there's a whole spectrum of people out there. One of the wonderful things in which we have had is the fact that I think we have over 7,000 people, I think, in Ohio who had signed up as far as the Poor People Campaign. Imagine that. Imagine if 7,000 people, and those 7,000 people, at least each person could speak to another person, that number could actually increase or triple as much as we would want. Rick, as we're here, as I'm speaking with you right now, Rick, and we're speaking to you, Rick, I hope that you sign up, Rick, you know.
Oh, yes.
You know?
I signed up We the World like a year or two ago. Definitely. So, but okay, so thank you, Samuel. Let's bring in our next guest. And I'm going to change the spotlight here. So Jana Larsen serves as coordinator for We the World's campaign for economic justice, and is the reason why We the World and the Poor People's Campaign have been collaborating for close to a year now. She also serves as our calendar maven and helps to make important connections and collaborations with many of our partners. Welcome to the broadcast, Jana Larsen.
Well, hello, Rick. I don't think that was the bio that I wrote, but
No, not at all.
well, but first of all, this is
Well,
so
you can say the bio that you want.
well, I
want.
can't remember it. I'm too old, but I do want to say one thing. It was several years ago. I think it was 5 years ago that I told my mom, you know what, Mom, I really want to start a movement. She goes, that's nice, dear. And then she, what are your plans? And I go, well, I have no idea. And then on 2017, I saw the TeleSummit with you, Rick. And I thought, oh, here we go. This is it. And I signed up. And okay, I remember that I was so intimidated by all the visionaries because, including Rick, just like amazing ideas, doing all this great, wonderful stuff. And they had a vision, they figured out how to do it, they made it happen. And but I finally realized that I liked being behind the scenes. And by no means am I a guru technician, but I do have to kind of brag a little bit. Yesterday I felt like I had a feeling very akin to the person who discovers how to make fire, because it happened and I was like, ah, to no one else in the room because it was only my dog and my cat, but I felt really good. And so anyway, onward with that project. And of course I'm helping Mary and Samuel, and I'm very slow on this spreadsheet because I get cross-eyed, and she's got all these columns and she whips through it and she turns things to green and she turns things to yellow and then she goes, whoop, go back to here. And I get lost, but we're working on it. So anyway,
Well,
I'm,
Jana,
go ahead.
no, I was going to say, Jana, it sounds like you're on fire.
Yes, and we are on fire.
Right.
So Sue said, I told that to Sue Blythe this morning. She goes, oh, that's a good seed idea. So her mind's already going, and pretty soon she's going to have us all working on yet another project, knowing Sue.
Right. And do you want to talk about why you're passionate about economic justice?
Well, Rick, whenever we have a meeting that is about this subject and dismantling racism, I'm the one that always starts crying, and I have my lavender here. Because when everything you guys said, Mary, Brian, Samuel, I just felt myself tearing up, and because it just gets me. And I am a person who is poor if you look at the statistics, but I don't feel poor in spirit, and I feel very lucky to be able to do what I'm doing and trying to help save the world. So pretty much my life goal.
Oops. Right, exactly. So, so we all thank you, Jana, for actually bringing us all together here. It's because of you that we are all together. And so let's open it up. Any thoughts about how we can move towards the kind of society, I guess we talk about with We the World, we talk about a we-based society, the concept of a society that prioritizes we consciousness, and we consciousness, you could think of that as like where the health and well-being of each member of society is prioritized because it is considered to be essential for the health and well-being of the whole society. And we can think of the whole world in that way too. One of the panels that we had recently was on interdependence. And, it's very clear that what's happening to one person affects what's happening to all. And it's no more clear now than when the pandemic has kind of struck the planet, right? So in each community, if even one person has COVID-19, there is the possibility that it will affect the health and survival of the entire community. Well, that's what we consciousness is about in general. And I think, wasn't it Martin Luther King Jr. who said, if one person is diminished, then we're all diminished, that kind of concept. But now we're living in a world where that's in the headlines, because of COVID-19. Anyone want to reflect on this? Maybe Mary, since we started with you, we can kind of go around again.
Yeah, listening to some of the other presentations for the past few days and listening, I started this work a few years ago when I had been working, literally had been working 16 hours a day for years. And then as I quit one of the jobs to be able to take care of my mom in her final years. And it really was the first time where I actually had a moment to bring my head up and breathe. Literally, like, oh, this is what's going on in the world, because I had been working, for so many hours a day for so long, and then started this journey. And now that I'm doing this work simply because of an email that I sent to Reverend Barber's organization, just like your story, Rick, of you had that inspiration, and then Jana had that inspiration, and Brian had an inspiration. So that's all it takes. I've heard Deepak Chopra this within the last week or so in a video talking about things that resonate deeply with me, that living our authentic selves, that is like the root cause of not living from our authentic selves, not living from that true voice inside ourselves is the root cause. This is the interpretation I took, that it's the root cause of how we are so messed up right now, basically, that we are so trained not to listen and not to connect to each other, and we're separated. And that this synchronicity, I heard that, that theme coming through loud and clear this past few days, the synchronicity and living from our authentic selves, listening to our voice, connecting as we are one. That for me, if we can do that, I truly believe we will change this world, because it's in each of us. We know what we need to do. We just need to listen to ourselves. But in order to do that, we have to have some relief, because there are people trying to survive. And so if we can each, help each other, give each other a moment to breathe and catch our breath, and actually try and listen to that voice inside, I truly believe that we can make the changes necessary in this world. So that's
definitely
my story. I'm sticking to it.
Yep, definitely. Any thoughts, Brian?
Well, if I've learned anything about COVID-19, it has ripped off the scab of what was wrong here in my country, and it has literally become the way we have to save the country. And let me explain that. We find out with this unique virus that in order for us to save ourselves, I have to wear a mask, not to protect myself, but to protect you. So there it is, in demonstrating that the act of saving the world begins when I see me in you, and you see you in me. These issues that we're talking about here, they're important and they're weighty, but I have hope, because we get it. People are getting it. People are understanding that there's so much more to this world, to humanity, to living the best possible life that one can live. And it all revolves around making sure that my neighbor feels safe and secure and connected as I feel safe and secure and connected. And this does not have to be a philosophical or a heady or a disconnected discussion from the reality that we live every day. The pandemic has shown us that we are the government. When our government fails, it's every common day people reaching out through mutual aid, through like people have done from time immemorial. It's you know, I'm not a conservative by any means, but one of the definitions of conservatism is looking back and drawing lessons from the past. And in this case, with the virus and all, maybe we should look back on that in that kind of a context, because something is being taught here. The universe is teaching. The question is, are we listening and heeding the lesson?
Exactly. Exactly. And, you know, one of the things you were talking about, which is this idea that in order to save society, you have to see yourself in other people, and in terms of wearing a mask. Well, maybe that is the difference between a me society. We always put
Yes.
the fingers down for the me society, and then the we society is the fingers up, the three fingers up. So that's interesting, because I hadn't actually put that together, but maybe that, you know, because it's become almost like a political statement, you know, wearing a mask. But that's really what we're saying in a sense, or what the conversation is. Are we looking out for ourselves, or are we looking out for the collective, which includes the health of ourselves? So Samuel, any thoughts?
Yeah, you know, when I had received an email from Jana, which asking me to participate in this, and the fact that we'll be speaking about economic justice, you know, I had to go back in my mind again and to see, so what is it that economic justice means for me and means for other people? And I couldn't find, so I began doing some research on this. And a quote in which I found, it said that the ultimate purpose of economic justice is to free each person to engage creatively in the unlimited work beyond economics, that of the mind and of the spirit.
Definitely. That makes perfect sense to me. And, you know, it's one of those things that we notice with the 11 campaigns. You know, economic justice is one of 11 campaigns for change that we have with We the World. We've noticed, I mean, it becomes clear very quickly that each one is connected intimately with all of the others, you know. And I'll just say them just so that people know what we're talking about. With the 11 campaigns are unity, interdependence, environment, economic justice, health, children and youth, women, human rights, freedom, disarmament, and peace. And they were designed to be a kind of a comprehensive blueprint for global and societal transformation. So yeah, go ahead.
I heard that, Rick, and my heart leaped, because I'm thinking, my goodness, it's day 4 and he graciously invited Ohio Poor People's Campaign. But I would have loved to have been here for the first 3 days and continue for the remaining 7, because all of those topics we speak on, and we work intently in our communities, individually and collectively, in our state and in our nation, and worldwide to achieve. It's important work. And we in the campaign, we have we say somebody's hurting our people, and it's gone on far too long, and we're not going to be silent anymore about this. You know, the first step is to wake up. You know, there are a lot of woke people now, but we also say in the movement, it's not the waking, it's the rising. And our job is to make sure people rise up and reach out to one another and support each other to make this world happen, to build that beloved community that Dr. King and others spoke of, you know. And we can do this. And we don't have to adopt the tactics and style of the entrenched status quo powers that are in control now. This is what distinguishes us, our tradition that we're standing on through Gandhi and King and others, from other people who are saying, yeah, the situation is screwed up and we want to do something about it. You know, we're going to do this the right way, you know, through love, through compassion, because that's the only way it can be done.
Definitely, definitely. Great, Jana, any thoughts on your end?
Well, you know that chill I was talking about before we started? I'm having it again. So really, everyone, thank you so much for being here. It's just thrilling to know you and to work with you. And I just know the world will be a better place because all the work you all are doing and the work we're doing together. So thank you. This has been amazing. Thank you, Rick.
Could
Thank
I
you.
say one thing?
Sure.
There's a specific way we usually end anything we're with. Come on, Brian. Hit it.
Oh, well, this is Rick's party.
Oh, I'm
So,
sorry.
we have to ask permission.
It's all of our party. That's okay. Well, if you have a particular thing, how about this?
Yeah.
I wanted to just sort of make a couple of announcements and then we'll do that. How's that? Sounds good? So, and even before the announcements, I also wanted, because Brian, you were saying how you are so interested in all of these 11 themes, you know, and how we're all working for all of those. So we think of them almost like a wheel, you know, like a wheel of, like each of these are spokes on the wheel. And then, and I forget, Jana, who said it, but they thought, you know, maybe all these spokes on the wheel move, you know, point to the center, and the center of the wheel is a heart, which is a cute idea. I forget who said that on one of our.
It may have been Peter. Does that sound right?
It does sound right, Peter Melton. So,
Yeah.
but the idea is, if you have a wheel that has all these spokes, and there's, let's say, a problem with one of the spokes, like if economic justice is not really realized in the society, then as the wheel rolls down the road, it's going to bump on that spoke. It's going to be like a bump, you know. And if you know, human rights is not realized in the society, when it gets to that part of the wheel, it's going to bump as this wheel of society rolls down the road. So that's why, you know, for each of these things, it's important to focus on it, because that focus is how things can change in a particular area. And of course, keeping in mind that everything is all interconnected. And the intersectionality, that's the word that people are using more and more to talk about how things are connected. But that's it. Any other thoughts about that? Well,
You're right. You said it well.
Oh, okay, good. All right. So so let's see. I wanted to first thank everyone. And also for our upcoming TeleSummit panels, to find out what's happening on each of the days, you can check the schedule by going to 11daysofglobalunity.org. 11 is a numeral. And you can also see which things you might want to check out that have already happened, and you can watch the recordings. Like I think Mary mentioned earlier, the Summit on the Future of Humanity with Archbishop Desmond Tutu and Vandana Shiva and Audrey Kitagawa and a bunch of amazing folks. You can actually see that by going to We the World's Facebook page, which is facebook.com/the We Campaign, or you can go to our YouTube page, youtube.com/WeTheWorld.org. And to learn more about We the World and the We campaign, go to we.net. And of course, collaboration is key. And as I always say, you know, societal and global transformation is not a spectator sport. So please go to we.net/partner, and that's where you can sign up to work with us as an organization or as an individual, and join the We team. And so now let's hear from Brian for the ending, the close that Samuel was talking about.
Well, before we go there, I just wanted to ask my fellow comrades to shout out our event tonight. And I was trying to find the exact
Good idea.
name of it.
Isn't it called Voting is Power Unleashed?
Yes. Yep.
Something.
And you can catch it on the poorpeoplescampaign.org website. You can get information there. And then on the Facebook, the Poor People's Campaign Facebook page. And you will find all the information there about the event as well. So that's 7 to 9. And anybody in Ohio, just watching from Ohio, we have a watch party. And you can check the Ohio Poor People's Campaign Facebook page for that information too.
And is that 7 Eastern time?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. That sounds great.
And that whole program is coming out of our research in the report that we publish, Unleashing the Power of Poor and Low-Income Americans, which explains to folks why people who are low income and poor, and that's within 200% of the poverty line that's currently defined, have the key to change the policies of America. And by changing the policies of America, we will change the ethics and the morals of America. And that's what it's about for us. So when we close out as a movement, we chant forward together, not one step back. So we're going to do this 3 times. I will start with the forward together, and then you will answer back, not one step back, and then join me with forward together, not one step back for the last 2 times, okay? And everybody, I want you to say this so loud, and those of you on the broadcast, that your neighbors and your co-workers, if you're watching in a cubicle or wherever you may be properly social distance, we want to say this loud enough so that folks can hear you through that distance.
And your dog to start barking.
Yes. So on me, forward together,
Not one step back.
Forward together.
Not one step back.
One more time. Forward
together. Not one step back.
Thank
Wow.
Thank you, Rick.
That's great. Thank you. And remember, it's all about we. We inspire, inform, and involve, 3 I's that make a we. Thank you. And we look forward to seeing you at our next TeleSummit panel. Bye-bye.